On an autumnal October afternoon in the year 2013, a young girl named Abigail Hernandez left school and was ready to go home. She had plans, dreams, and a promising life, but as evening fell, the shadows grew longer and Abigail did not arrive home. Calls from her mother went unanswered, and concern quickly turned into fear. What began as a normal day turned into her parents' worst nightmare. Their daughter seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Abigail raised more questions than answers, leaving the community in suspense as they tried to unravel the eerie mystery of what had truly happened to her that day. All parents, in an effort to protect their children, explained that strangers should not be trusted, not engaged in conversation, let alone agree to go anywhere or get into their car. These conversations, as well as the explanation of the reasons for such measures and the potential consequences. The story of Abigail Hernandez, an American schoolgirl, is a vivid example of what can happen when one is careless for a moment and trusts a person who seems friendly and helpful. She hoped a kind stranger would simply drive her home, but instead she found herself in the hands of a real monster. Abigail Hernandez, better known as Abby, was born on October 12, 1998 in Manchester, New Hampshire. She was the youngest daughter in the family of Reuben and Senia Hernandez and grew up with her older sister, Sarah, with whom she developed a close relationship. Abby's mother worked as a nurse at the local hospital while her father worked in commerce. The Hernandez family was warm and prosperous, but when Abby was still a teenager, her parents decided to divorce. Her father subsequently remarried and started a new family, while the two daughters remained with their mother. Since childhood, Abby proved to be an active and sociable child. She was surrounded by friends, easily found new hobbies, and explored them with enthusiasm. Abby was passionate about sports, drew well, took photographs, read a lot, and learned foreign languages, which came easily to her. Around the age of 12, Abby joined a hiking club and started camping and mountaineering. She fell in love with the mountains and learned to put the lessons of survival in nature into practice. No wonder, as the picturesque landscapes of New Hampshire, with its forests, rivers, and mountains, are the perfect setting for tourism and adventure, attracting extreme sports enthusiasts from all over the country. The summer of 2013 was an eventful one for Abby. When she returned to school in September, she looked forward to telling her friends about her summer adventures, the places she had visited, and her new achievements. At this time, the 14-year-old girl had started a romantic relationship with Jimmy, a student at her school who was 1 year older. Senia knew her daughter was dating this young man and had no objections to the relationship. In early October 2013, with the autumn holidays and Abby's 15th birthday approaching, she enthusiastically planned a mountain hike with the members of the hiking club she belonged to. She had received new hiking boots as a gift, which were somewhat expensive, so she decided to wear them to school as well. On October 9th, Abby went to class as usual. She planned to go to the park after school and promised her mother she wouldn't be late. However, when her daughter had still not come home by 5 p.m., Senia called her, but her phone was turned off. The mother worried, but thought maybe her daughter's phone battery had died and she was still out late with friends. A few hours later, when there was still no word, Senia panicked. She called her daughter's friends and teachers to find out when Abby had left school and who she might have left with. She was told that Abby left right after class and said goodbye to her friends at the bus stop, where they boarded the school bus while Abby decided to walk home. Abby didn't stop by her friends' houses, nor did she call anyone. Even Jimmy, whom she was supposed to meet, couldn't reach her. A frightened Senia went straight to the police with her eldest daughter, Sarah, and reported her missing. Since Abby was still a minor, the search began immediately. It turned out that her phone's signal had been lost about 1.5 kilometers from the house. The news of the missing schoolgirl spread quickly on social media. Flyers with her photo, a description of her clothing, and a phone number to call if any information was found were printed. The next morning, the missing person report was broadcast on the 7 o'clock news. Hundreds of police officers, volunteers, and local residents participated in the search for Abby. They combed through parks, vacant lots, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings. The police checked various leads, looked for witnesses, and spoke with the girl's family and friends, but without success. Investigators tried to find out if Abby had any enemies or unwanted, overly persistent admirers. However, those who knew her claimed she was always friendly and outgoing and enjoyed being in company. She had no conflicts with others, and none of her friends noticed anyone following her or trying to harm her. The first person investigators questioned was Jimmy, Abby's boyfriend, who immediately became a suspect. They tried to determine if there were any conflicts or resentments between the two that could have been a reason for harm, but Jimmy was shocked and didn't understand why he was suspected. He was truly baffled how anyone could think he would harm the girl he loved. Jimmy had a watertight alibi for the time of Abby's disappearance, confirmed by his family, teachers, and friends. His day was packed: classes, training, school band practice, and his grandfather's birthday party, which he did not miss. Jimmy cooperated willingly with the investigation, telling the police everything he knew, but it didn't help advance the investigation. The schoolgirl simply vanished into thin air. For a long time, there wasn't a single clue or even a hint as to which direction the investigation should go. It was clear to the investigators that the chances of finding her alive were approaching zero, but her family did not give up hope. About a month and a half after Abby's disappearance, her mother discovered a strange letter in her mailbox. The author was her missing daughter. In this message, the girl apologized for her actions and assured her that she was well, healthy, and safe. She wrote that she loved her mother and Sarah, but could not reveal exactly where she was now. The letter ended with the cryptic and concise sentence, "Dreams come true." A graphological analysis confirmed the letter's authenticity. The text was indeed written by Abby and dated early November, meaning she was most likely still alive. However, her whereabouts and the real reason for her disappearance remained a mystery. Why couldn't she reveal where she was? Perhaps she was afraid of something or someone, or maybe she was forced to write this message. Soon, the theory emerged that Abby had left home of her own accord, but after seeing the reports about her disappearance, decided to let her family know she was still alive. One hypothesis was that she had become pregnant and decided to run away with the father of the unborn child, fearing the family's anger and condemnation. However, this theory only provoked outrage from the Hernandez family. Sarah confidently stated that if her younger sister were really expecting a child, she would have been the first to know, as there had never been secrets between them. Furthermore, Abby's only boyfriend had been Jimmy, and according to his own words, he and Abby had never been intimate, meaning both remained innocent. Friends of the missing girl also confirmed that Abby wasn't dating anyone besides Jimmy and had never mentioned any other preference. Her best friend, Miranda, insisted that Abigail couldn't have been pregnant and wouldn't have abandoned her family after causing her mother and older sister so much pain. Besides, she had left all her documents, personal savings, and valuables at home. Investigators examined the letter for clues that might indicate her whereabouts, but found no coded messages or cries for help. Nevertheless, the case attracted the interest of the FBI, which classified it as a kidnapping. It was suspected that Abby was being held forcibly and had written the letter under duress, unable to specify her location, and this suspicion turned out to be correct. The kidnapper and his victim were only a few dozen kilometers from the Hernandez house. Furthermore, since Abigail's disappearance, the police had driven past the perpetrator's home several times but found nothing suspicious. The kidnapper himself was desperate, trying to decide what to do next with his captive. Who is Nathaniel Kibby? It's time to reveal the kidnapper's identity. Nathaniel, or simply Nate Kibby, was born on July 15, 1980 in the same town as Abby. There is little information about his family, but according to some reports, his mother raised him alone and he never knew his father. During his school years, Nate was known as a real troublemaker and bully. He constantly got into fights and conflicts with others. He even had a list of people he wanted to hurt or beat up. Even in childhood, he showed aggression and cruelty, which is why his classmates tried to stay away from him and the teachers couldn't handle him. As a teenager, Kibby repeatedly came onto the police's radar for various offenses. He was a member of a gang which he was proud of and had a particular passion for firearms, about which he was very knowledgeable. He had numerous convictions for fights involving serious bodily harm, possession of illegal substances, and petty theft. However, he always managed to get away with administrative penalties. Interesting fact, Nate attended the same school as Abby, but due to the age difference, their paths never crossed, either inside or outside of school. After graduation, Nate Kibby seemed to develop a new attitude and decided to turn away from crime. He got a job at one of the local companies, where his colleagues and management generally spoke positively about him. But a few years later, after a serious conflict with a union member, Nate quit, moved to the suburbs, and settled in a questionable locality in a trailer park. Neighbors considered him strange and tried to avoid interacting with this short-tempered and aggressive man. In 2011, when Kibby was in his early 30s, he began dating a 13-year-old girl with whom he actually lived. She came from a broken family, had run away from home, and lived in Kibby's trailer. He didn't even hide their relationship, introducing the schoolgirl as his girlfriend. Astonishingly, these events went unpunished for him. In the spring of 2013, Nate Kibby made his first kidnapping attempt. Fortunately, his plan failed. He attacked a 15-year-old girl at a bus stop near an educational institution, trying to force her into his car. She resisted desperately, screamed, and called for help. Passers-by ran towards the noise, and the perpetrator hastily left the scene. Despite the statements of the victim and eyewitnesses, the case was soon closed and did not go to court. No one considered Kibby a real threat. Now, back to the day of Abigail's disappearance. October 9, 2013. On the eve of her 15th birthday, she had received a new pair of hiking boots that were a little too tight. Abby decided to wear the shoes to school. By the end of class, her feet started to hurt, but she still decided to walk home. Every step was painful, and it was still about 1.5 kilometers to her house. At that moment, an old pickup truck pulled up beside her, driven by Nathaniel. The smiling man offered her a ride anywhere, but Abby declined. The stranger, however, was persistent and drove slowly alongside her, not leaving her alone. Nate noticed the girl was limping and asked what was wrong. Abby sighed and admitted that her new shoes were pinching her feet. Hearing this, Kibby opened the passenger door and offered her a ride. She hesitated but finally agreed. Abby thought no danger could come from this friendly man, but she was gravely mistaken. Nate chatted casually with her during the drive, trying to put her at ease, which he succeeded in doing. Abby felt safe, answered his questions, and laughed at his jokes. At some point, Kibby announced he needed to stop at a hardware store to pick up repair materials. As they pulled into the dark parking lot, Abby became visibly nervous. She said it was only a short way to her house and that she could easily walk it, but noticing the driver's menacing look, she decided to unbuckle her seatbelt and jump out of the car. Nate anticipated her move, grabbed her clothing with one hand, and quickly retrieved a pistol from the glove compartment with the other. He pointed the gun directly at the terrified young girl's face, threatening to kill her if she tried to resist. Then the kidnapper bound her hands and feet with cable ties and pulled a baseball cap over her head so she couldn't see the road or recognize where she was being taken. He soon noticed, however, that Abby slightly moved the cap so she could see what was happening. This angered him, and he used the stun gun, giving Abby an electric shock that rendered her unconscious. Abby woke up in a cramped and stuffy, windowless space. As it later turned out, it was a small shipping container belonging to Nathaniel, parked in a trailer park area slightly further away amidst dense tree cover. Soon, the kidnapper himself appeared, holding a roll of duct tape and a motorcycle helmet in his hand. He taped her mouth and eyes shut, then pulled the helmet over her head, ensuring the victim was completely immobilized and helpless. Then he tore her clothes off and committed acts of violence. Nate forced her into intimate acts almost daily to live out his most perverse fantasies. Besides physical violence, Nate also actively exerted psychological pressure. He threatened to kill her family if she dared to escape or call for help. At the same time, he promised to let her go if she behaved calmly and didn't cause him any problems. In the first few days, Abby was in a state of shock and essentially wanted to give up on life. But gradually, she realized he didn't intend to kill her, at least not yet. Abby then decided to build an emotional connection with her kidnapper to convince him to let her go. She tried to persuade him that she didn't judge him, that everyone can make mistakes, and that she wouldn't go to the police if he released her. Nate, however, was an extremely unpredictable person, and any little thing could trigger a fit of rage in him, turning him into a true monster. Sometimes he showed a certain tenderness towards his captive, but more often, he was cruel and resorted to moral and physical violence. The container where Nate held Abigail was well soundproofed. When they learned about the large-scale search for the missing girl, Nate came up with the idea of making her write a letter to her mother to assure her family she was okay and to prompt them to call off the search. Abigail wrote several letters at Nate's dictation, each time trying to include a clue about her location, but the man noticed these attempts and punished her severely. Eventually, she wrote the letter exactly as he demanded to avoid further abuse. After about a year, Nathaniel began to trust Abby so much that he allowed her to help him produce counterfeit money. Sometimes he let her sleep in the trailer and even assigned her the responsibility of preparing meals. Despite this trust, he continued to abuse her, mistreat her, and demand intimacy with her. He forced her to call him master and never revealed his real name. Gradually, Abigail managed to build some kind of relationship with him, and one day, Nate even agreed to bring her books and magazines. On one of the pages, the girl saw the name Nathaniel Kibby, but she wasn't sure if it was his real name, so she decided to risk it. One day she addressed him using his first name to gauge his reaction. To her surprise, he just rolled his eyes, sighed, and calmly asked how she knew his name. Abby answered honestly that she had seen it in a book. The man just smirked and said nothing. Abigail spent most of her time in the soundproof container. She couldn't hear what was happening outside and was unaware that police officers had once passed just a few meters away from her. As Nate had once again broken the law, he decided to cooperate with the investigation and confess to illegal gun possession. They came to search his place, examined the trailer, but did not approach the container. No one even thought of looking there. Thanks to his cooperation with the police, Kibby got away with just a fine and the confiscation of the weapon. It seemed incredible, but after all his atrocities, he was never brought to trial. It seemed as though luck was always on his side, and he himself appeared to believe in his impunity. He had no intention of letting Abby go, but perhaps he was slowly getting bored with her. In July 2014, Nathaniel met a woman named Lorraine in a bar. After a brief acquaintance, he invited her to his trailer, where they had an intimate relationship. The next day, Lorraine, who complained about lack of money and difficulties paying her rent, received $250 bills from him. However, she soon discovered it was counterfeit money and angrily called Kibby, saying she had told the police where she got the bills and that he should expect a visit from them. This phone call was a turning point in Abigail's fate. On July 20th, the kidnapper suddenly gave her all her personal belongings, tied her hands, put her in the passenger seat of his car, and pulled a baseball cap over her face. Abby didn't understand what was happening and feared her final hour had come. But Nate stopped on a country road, untied her, and said, "Get out and don't you dare go to the police." Then he got into his car and sped away. Abigail couldn't believe this was really happening. She simply walked along the road until she saw a signpost and realized it was only a short distance to her house. The girl covered the distance in a couple of hours, constantly looking back and fearing the kidnapper would return. But there was no sign of him. The Hernandez family had a surveillance camera at the front door which recorded the moment Abby came through the door. She heard her mother talking on the phone and called out loudly for her. The stunned woman dropped her mobile phone and rushed to the doorway. Mother and daughter hugged and cried for a long time, unable to believe that this nightmare was finally over and they were together again. Abigail noticed how much her mother had changed. She had aged significantly and become gaunt in recent months. Her mother began to question her daughter about where she had been and what had happened to her, suggesting they go to the police immediately. Abigail, remembering the kidnapper's threats, decided, however, not to betray him and said she didn't know who had kidnapped her or where she had been held. She also didn't give the police his name, fearing Nate might pursue her or her loved ones. The girl spent the next week in uncertainty, not knowing what to do next. Finally, she decided to tell her mother the truth. Her mother persuaded her again to go to the police, explaining that the perpetrator must be punished for his actions. Besides, neither Abigail nor her family could feel safe as long as Kibby was free. On July 27, 2014, Abigail named the kidnapper and provided the make and license plate of his car. The man was arrested the very next day and, to everyone's surprise, offered no resistance, although he completely denied his guilt. However, in his trailer, as well as in the container which was finally examined, numerous pieces of evidence were found indicating that Abby had been held there for a long period and brutally abused. Hair, blood traces, sweat stains, and broken fingernails of the victim were found. Although Kibby's guilt was obvious, his defense attorney applied for bail release as early as August. The judge granted the request, sparking great public outrage and shock. However, on the same day, a restraining order was issued prohibiting Kibby from approaching the Hernandez family or attempting to contact them. The trial against Nathaniel Kibby began in December 2014 and lasted until May 2015. In an attempt to mitigate his sentence, the defendant agreed to a plea deal and pleaded guilty to his crimes. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole only after 45 years. Abigail gave a speech in court, saying she had forgiven her kidnapper and through the terrible experience learned to appreciate life and every minute spent with loved ones more. Her mother also spoke, saying she hated him from the bottom of her heart but was simultaneously grateful that he had kept her daughter alive and allowed her to return home. This story shows how Abigail's incredible courage and her mother's support helped bring the kidnapper to account and ensure he was punished. Despite the horror she experienced, Abby was able to forgive her tormentor and develop a new understanding of the value of life. The complicated trial ended with a well-deserved verdict, allowing the Hernandez family to finally feel safe. Thank you for watching and take care of yourselves.